They called themselves the Varan, the strongest, most advanced species in the galaxy. For centuries, they ruled over star systems with unchallenged power, their fleets vast and their technology beyond comprehension. No planet dared to defy them. No species even came close to matching their strength. But all of that changed the day they discovered a small blue world on the edge of a quiet spiral arm. A planet called Earth. At first, the Varan didn't think much of it. Just another primitive species, fragile, short-lived, and armed with nothing more than metal machines and ambition. But when their observation drones were destroyed by something no Varan technology could detect, curiosity turned into unease. The Council ordered an expedition. They wanted to see these humans up close, to study them, maybe even enslave them like they had done to countless others. It was supposed to be an easy mission, a quick visit, a simple demonstration of dominance. But the moment their ships entered Earth's orbit, something felt wrong. The Varan could feel it, not through sensors or scanners, but in their instincts. This planet radiated a kind of energy they couldn't understand. The humans didn't cower. They didn't send surrender signals. Instead, they looked back through their telescopes and smiled. The first contact didn't happen with a diplomat or a general. It happened with a group of scientists, ordinary people with shaking hands and determined hearts. They didn't run from the unknown. They reached out to it. That alone baffled the Varan. Every species they'd ever met either bowed or fought. But humans, they questioned, they adapted, and they learned faster than anyone had expected. Within days, the Varan realized something terrifying. Humans weren't the strongest, but they were the most unpredictable. When threatened, they didn't break. They evolved. When defeated, they didn't surrender. They rebuilt stronger. The Varan began to see strange patterns in human behavior, things that didn't fit any galactic logic. Humans would sacrifice themselves for strangers. They would laugh in the face of death. They would turn fear into fire. One of the Varan observers, a seasoned commander who had crushed rebellions across 3 galaxies, found himself unable to understand them. He watched a single human soldier stare down a Varan war drone with nothing but a rifle and a heartbeat, and win. That moment spread through the fleet like wildfire. For the first time in their history, the Varan felt something they'd never experienced before: doubt. As days turned into weeks, the situation spiraled. The humans began to learn the Varan's technology faster than the Varan themselves could imagine. Energy weapons, shields, propulsion systems, things that took centuries to perfect, humans replicated in months. Some said Earth had awakened something ancient, something sleeping beneath their fragile blue skies. The Varan thought they were studying humans, but slowly they began to realize the truth. Humanity wasn't just another species. They were a catalyst, something that could change the balance of the galaxy forever. And then, on the night the Varan flagship hovered over Earth's capital, a single message was transmitted from the surface. It was short. It was simple. And it changed everything. Your reign ends tonight. What followed, no one in the galaxy was prepared for. The message stunned the galaxy. The words, "Your reign ends tonight," were replayed across every Varan outpost and transmission hub. To most, it sounded like madness. How could a species that had only just learned to travel beyond their moon dare to challenge the most powerful empire in known space? Yet behind those words, there was something the Varan couldn't quite define, something raw and unsettling. It wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. On Earth, the world stood on edge. Governments had gone silent. Communication networks were under lockdown, and the sky was filled with strange metallic shadows. People looked up, some in fear, others in wonder. The air carried a strange hum, like the planet itself was holding its breath. No one knew what would happen next. In orbit, the Varan fleet waited for orders. Their commander, who had once reduced entire civilizations to ash, hesitated for the first time in his life. He had seen humans fight, seen how they turned desperation into strength, and something in him whispered that this wouldn't be as simple as destroying another primitive world. Reports from reconnaissance drones made little sense. Human scientists had tapped into energies that defied physics. and their engineers were reverse engineering alien tech faster than any AI could calculate. The commander ordered a direct communication link. He wanted to see the human behind that message. The screen flickered, and a face appeared. Not a soldier, not a leader, but a scientist. Tired eyes, calm voice, and a quiet confidence that cut through the static. "You came here thinking we were weak," the human said softly. "But you never asked what we're willing to do to survive." The commander didn't reply. He couldn't. Something in those words carried the weight of 1,000 generations, an instinct every species in the galaxy had long forgotten. Humanity's strength wasn't in power or technology. It was in something deeper, something that couldn't be measured or scanned. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, other civilizations watched. Species that had once bowed to the Varen now whispered in secret. They spoke of Earth, the small planet that had dared to stand up to gods. Some began to wonder if this was the beginning of something greater. If maybe, just maybe, the age of fear was ending. Back on Earth, scientists worked day and night beneath the ruins of old cities, connecting captured alien tech with human machinery. They discovered strange patterns in Varen designs, codes hidden deep within their systems, as if the technology itself carried a message. Some believed it wasn't truly Varen in origin. Some whispered that their power came from something older, something the humans might have just awakened. The tension grew unbearable. The Varen were preparing for a full-scale assault, but their systems began to fail one by one. Ships powered down without reason, navigation arrays went dark, and entire fleets drifted aimlessly. The humans hadn't fired a single shot. It was as if Earth itself was pushing back. In the silence of deep space, the commander stared at the dying glow of his ship's core. Every instinct told him to retreat, but pride wouldn't let him. He sent one final transmission to his fleet. "Advance!" And as the armada descended toward Earth's atmosphere, the sky lit up, not with fire, but with light. A pulse of energy rippled from the planet's surface, bending clouds, distorting stars. For a brief moment, the Varen saw something within that light, shapes, patterns, memories not their own. And then, everything went silent. Far below, the human scientist watched from an underground control room, hand trembling over a console. "It's begun," he whispered. What had humanity unleashed that night? No one could say. But one thing was certain. Nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The light that spread across the sky was unlike anything anyone had seen before. It wasn't an explosion or a weapon. It was something alive. Every satellite, every ship, every sensor went blind for a moment that felt like forever. When the systems came back online, half the Varen fleet had vanished. No debris, no signal, nothing. Just silence and a faint glow hanging above the planet like a warning. On Earth, chaos spread. Power grids flickered, communication lines failed, and strange readings began to appear deep beneath the crust. Scientists tried to explain it, but the numbers didn't make sense. The pulse that had crippled the Varen ships seemed to come from the planet itself. It wasn't human-made, or at least not completely. Something had responded to the invasion, something older than recorded history. The scientist who had sent the message watched as readings from around the world came pouring in. Cities that had been silent since the Varen arrived were lighting up again. People were organizing, building, preparing. For the first time, humanity wasn't running, they were uniting. Yet deep down, even he couldn't shake the question that haunted him. What exactly had they awakened? Far above, fragments of the vanished fleet drifted through the void. Inside one of the damaged ships, a young Varen officer woke to find his systems offline and his commander missing. His training told him to report back, but there was no one left to receive his message. He looked toward the blue planet below, its surface glowing faintly, and felt something he didn't understand. Fear mixed with awe. He had seen destruction before, but this wasn't destruction. It was transformation. Meanwhile, back on the Varen homeworld, panic spread through the council. The fleet's disappearance shattered their illusion of control. They began to argue among themselves, some demanding revenge, others insisting they retreat and study the phenomenon from afar. But one voice, calm and cold, cut through the noise. A strategist, older than most of the council, suggested something few dared to consider. "What if the humans didn't create that energy?" she said. "What if they were chosen by it?" Her words unsettled the room. The Varen had long believed they were the apex of creation, the final stage of evolution. The idea that another species, or something within that species, could surpass them was unthinkable. Yet now, faced with their greatest loss, they could no longer deny the truth. Humanity was different. On Earth, strange phenomena began to occur. People started having visions, flashes of alien worlds, symbols carved into light, voices that spoke in patterns rather than words. Some said it was the side effect of exposure to alien energy. Others whispered that the planet itself was communicating through them. The scientist who led the underground resistance received one of those visions. It showed a great structure buried deep beneath the ocean, pulsing like a heartbeat. He gathered a small team to investigate, but as they prepared, something unexpected happened. The young Varen officer, stranded in orbit, managed to send a message down to Earth. Not a threat, not a demand, but a plea. "I need to understand what you've done," his transmission said. "Because if you've awakened what I think you have, none of us will survive." The message reached the resistance base just as their sensors detected movement in space. New ships, larger than before, approaching from the outer edges of the system. But these weren't Varen. Their signatures didn't match any known species. Someone, or something else, was coming. And for the first time, both humans and Varen realized they might not be enemies anymore, but survivors of something far greater, something neither of them understood. The air above Earth grew heavy as the new ships emerged from the dark edges of space. They were unlike anything either humans or Varen had seen. Massive, silent, and cloaked in a strange light that seemed to bend around them. Even the most advanced scanners failed to read their composition. They didn't broadcast any signal, didn't respond to calls, didn't even seem to acknowledge the fleets waiting for them. They just drifted closer, slow and deliberate, like predators studying their prey. On the surface, panic began to spread again. Governments tried to calm the people, but the sky told a different story. Every night, the strange glow grew stronger, painting the horizon in shades of silver and blue. The resistance scientists worked tirelessly in their underground facility, tracing the energy pulses to the structure deep beneath the ocean, the same one from the scientists' vision. They believed it was the source, or maybe the key, to whatever had awakened on Earth. But time was running out. The young Varen officer who had contacted them finally made it to Earth's surface. His ship crash-landed in the middle of a desolate plain, and when the humans found him, they didn't attack. They brought him underground. He was weak, cautious, and completely unprepared for how human eyes could carry both fear and kindness at once. He explained what little he knew. The ships approaching were not Varen, not even from their records. They were ancient, forgotten even by the oldest civilizations. "We called them the architects," he said quietly. "They built the first empires, and then disappeared. If they've returned, it means the galaxy has been judged." The scientist listened, heart pounding. He wanted to ask what they were judging, but deep down he already knew. Humanity had tapped into something they were never meant to touch. The pulse, the energy, the visions, it was all connected. And now, the architects were coming to see what had been awakened. Across the globe, strange phenomena grew worse. Oceans surged without reason, skies flickered like broken glass, and people began hearing whispers in their minds. Soft voices speaking in patterns, echoing the same words. The core must awaken. No one knew what it meant, but the resonance pointed to the structure beneath the ocean. That was where everything began, and where it would likely end. The resistance gathered their forces. They didn't have alien weapons or massive ships, but they had determination. The scientist led the team personally, joined by the Varen officer who had once sworn to conquer them. Together, they boarded a submersible bound for the depths, following the signals pulsing from the core. As they descended, the water around them shimmered with faint light, almost alive. The deeper they went, the stronger the vibrations became, like the ocean itself was breathing. Then, through the murky darkness, they saw it, a vast metallic structure, ancient and untouched, covered in symbols that matched the visions. It wasn't built by humans or Varen, it was waiting for them. Above, in orbit, the architect ships began to unfold. Massive petals of light spread across the stars, forming patterns like constellations coming alive. Energy readings spiked. Every ship, human or alien, powered down in an instant. Even the planet's magnetic field began to twist. In the submersible, alarms blared. The scientist gripped the console as the ocean around them started to glow brighter than daylight. "It's reacting," he whispered. The Varen officer stared at the symbols on the hull and muttered, "No, it's waking up." The readings went off the charts. The core pulsed once, twice, and then sent a surge of energy straight into the sky. The clouds split apart, and the architect ships turned as one, focusing their light toward Earth. Every signal, every frequency, every channel went silent at once. The world stood still. And in that frozen moment, everyone, human and alien alike, felt it. Something vast and ancient had opened its eyes. The light that burst from the core didn't fade. It spread. Waves of energy rippled through the ocean, into the air, and out into space. Every human on Earth felt it in their bones, a vibration like a heartbeat that wasn't their own. For a moment, everything stopped. The wind, the machines, even the noise of the world. Then the voices returned. But this time they weren't whispers. They were clear. They spoke in every language at once, echoing through every mind. The chosen have awakened. The reckoning begins. Panic erupted across the planet. People fell to their knees, others ran, others simply stared at the sky, where the architect ships now formed a perfect ring around Earth. The Resistance Command Center lit up with emergency signals, but none of their systems worked. The scientist tried to regain control of communications, his hands shaking as he yelled for manual overrides. The Varen officer stood silently behind him, staring at the data streaming across the monitors. "They're not attacking," the officer said. "They're observing." But observing what? That question hung in the air as the core beneath them started to shift. The submersible's sensors picked up movement, massive structures rising from the seafloor, unfolding like the bones of a sleeping giant. The symbols on the hull began to glow brighter, forming patterns that matched the constellations above. It wasn't random. It was alignment. Then the scientist realized the truth. The core wasn't just reacting to the architects. It was communicating with them. The pulse that wiped out the Varen fleet hadn't been an attack. It was a signal. Earth hadn't awakened by accident. It had been called. Before he could speak, a deep rumble tore through the ocean floor. The submersible shook violently. Through the viewing glass, the team saw something rising, a structure larger than any ship, older than any city. It wasn't built of metal or stone, but something else entirely, something that looked alive. It pulsed in rhythm with the human heartbeat still echoing across the world. Back on the surface, satellite images showed the same thing happening in multiple places. Vast shapes emerging from oceans, deserts and mountains, all sharing the same glow. Across the stars, the architect fleet began to shift its formation, aligning perfectly with the rising structures. It was like watching a map unfold, one that connected Earth to something far beyond the galaxy. The scientist stared at the readings and whispered, "They're terraforming reality itself." The Varen officer turned to him sharply. "No, they're preparing it for ascension." No one knew what that meant, but they could feel it. Something was changing the very fabric of the universe, and Earth was at its center. The architects weren't coming to destroy humanity. They were waiting to see if humanity would survive what came next. Then, without warning, a transmission broke through the silence. It wasn't human, and it wasn't Varen. The voice was distorted, fragmented, but unmistakably ancient. "The core must choose," it said. "One will rise. The rest will fall." The lights flickered and the ocean roared. The submersible's systems went critical. The scientist looked out the window and saw the impossible. Human faces forming within the light of the core. Millions of them, all looking back as if they'd been there all along. And then, the architect ships began to descend. The sky turned white, and every signal across the planet carried the same chilling message. The test has begun. The world trembled as the architect ships broke through the clouds, their light cutting through the atmosphere like burning suns. Every city, every mountain, every ocean shimmered with the same pulse as the core deep below. The message, the test has begun, echoed through every mind. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was something deeper, something felt in the blood. Humanity stood at the edge of something it couldn't fully understand, yet somehow had always known was coming. In the depths, the submersible shook violently as the core erupted in blinding light. The scientist and his team were thrown to the floor, alarms screaming around them. He fought his way back to the controls, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We triggered something," he said, his eyes wide. "It's scanning us." The Varan officer steadied himself, his gaze locked on the core outside. "No, it's judging us." Across the planet, billions of people felt a strange pull in their minds. Memories flashing, moments of love, loss, kindness, cruelty. The core was reaching into every human life, measuring not power, but something far more human: intent. The architects weren't testing humanity's strength. They were testing its soul, and then, for the first time, the architects spoke directly, not through words, but through emotion. Images filled the air, the rise and fall of countless civilizations, all of them failing their test, all of them erased. Earth was the last chance. The scientist understood. "They're giving us a choice," he whispered. "Evolve or vanish." He didn't know how to answer a test like that, but instinct took over. He activated the neural link connected to the core, a desperate gamble. As the system connected, a surge of energy rushed through him, and for a moment he saw everything: galaxies folding, timelines converging, the Varans rise, and Earth's quiet persistence. He saw what made humanity different, the will to keep going, even in the face of the impossible. The core reacted. Its pulse shifted from harsh light to something softer, warmer. Above, the architect's ships paused. The energy that had been building began to fade. The test was reaching its end. Humanity had been seen, but then came the twist no one expected. The Varan officer standing beside him collapsed. His body flickered with the same light that filled the core. "It's not just judging humans," he gasped. "It's judging everyone." The readings confirmed it. The core had linked not only to Earth, but to every living consciousness connected to the Varan, the architects, and beyond. The test wasn't for humanity alone. It was for the galaxy. The core flared one final time, and then silence. The ocean stilled. The ships vanished. Every system came back online as if nothing had happened. Earth was safe, or so it seemed. The scientist stood trembling in the quiet. "Did we pass?" he whispered. The Varan officer looked at him, eyes glowing faintly. "No," he said softly. "We became the next test." Outside, the stars shifted subtly, constellations rearranging themselves as if the universe had rewritten its map. The light from the core faded into the water, leaving only ripples where the impossible had happened. Humanity had survived, but at a cost it didn't yet understand. In the silence that followed, one final message appeared across every screen, every frequency, every mind. The cycle begins anew, and somewhere deep beneath the ocean, the core pulsed once more, quiet, patient, waiting. The days that followed were strangely quiet. The skies cleared, the oceans calmed, and the world seemed to breathe again. The architect's ships had vanished as suddenly as they appeared, leaving no trace, no debris, no radiation, not even a shadow on the sensors. People around the globe began to emerge from shelters, blinking into the light, unsure whether they had survived an invasion or witnessed a miracle. The scientist stood on a cliff overlooking the sea, the wind brushing against his face. The place where the core had pulsed was now still, a wide expanse of glowing water, fading slowly back to its natural color. He had spent his whole life studying the unknown, searching for answers beyond Earth. Now that he had them, he wasn't sure he understood what they meant. The Varan officer stood beside him, silent as ever, his eyes scanning the horizon. "What happens now?" the scientist finally asked. The officer hesitated. You passed their test. But the message said the cycle begins again. Maybe it means something new starts here. Across the planet, signs of change were already appearing. Human technology had been altered in small, unexplainable ways. Devices that once depended on power now seemed to draw energy from the air itself. Data networks, once fragile, were suddenly faster than light. But the biggest change wasn't in machines, it was in people. Something had awakened inside them. A quiet awareness, a connection. People began reporting shared dreams, flashes of distant stars, or feelings of unity that defied explanation. The world that had once been divided by nations and fear was now bound by a single truth. They were not alone, and they never had been. Humanity had touched something beyond understanding and survived. That was enough to change everything. In the ruins of old cities, communities started to rebuild, not with greed or conquest, but with purpose. The resistance that had once fought to survive became a council that worked to unite. Even the remnants of the Varan fleet sent envoys to Earth not as conquerors but as equals. They had learned something too, that strength alone meant nothing without compassion, without the will to grow, yet not everything was clear. The scientist still woke at night hearing echoes of the architect's voice in his dreams. The cycle begins anew. He couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had been chosen for more than survival, that perhaps they were being prepared for a greater role in the galaxy, a role that would test not just their strength, but their humanity itself. One evening, as the sun set over the glowing sea, the scientist returned to the cliff. The ocean shimmered faintly, and for just a second, he thought he saw shapes beneath the surface, faint outlines of the core, pulsing softly, like a heartbeat waiting for its moment. He didn't feel fear this time, only calm. He turned to the Varan officer beside him. Do you think they'll ever come back? The officer looked at the sky where new constellations had formed, glowing faintly like paths in the dark. Maybe, he said, but next time we won't be the ones being tested. The scientist nodded, a small smile crossing his face. The world had changed, the galaxy had shifted, and humanity had found its place, not as the weakest nor the strongest, but as the bridge between what was and what could be. As the last light faded and the stars took their place, the ocean gave one final ripple, as if whispering goodbye, or perhaps hello. And somewhere in the vastness of space, unseen but felt, the architects watched in silence. The Earth was quiet again. But everyone knew, nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same.